Republicans in the Senate have killed a resolution that would have put limits on President Trump's ability to take action in Venezuela. 5 Republicans had broken rank last week to advance a war powers measure, many concerned about the possibility President Trump would order troops on the ground in Venezuela. One of those senators, Missouri's Josh Hawley, spoke before the vote about what changed his mind.
Trump is absolutely losing his mind right now because the United States Senate just delivered one of the most devastating blows to his presidency. And I'm not talking about some symbolic vote or meaningless resolution that goes nowhere. I'm talking about Republicans actually joining Democrats to slap down Trump's war powers with a 52-47 vote. 5 Republicans broke ranks. 5 Republican senators looked at what Trump is doing and said no, said absolutely not, said we're voting against you. And Trump is furious, completely furious, posting rage on Truth Social, calling these senators traitors, saying they should never be elected to office again, claiming they're destroying American national security. But that's not even worst part. This is the second time in recent months that Senate Republicans have voted against Trump. Back in October 2025, 5 Republicans also joined Democrats to revoke Trump's emergency tariff powers on Brazil, rolling back his 50% tariffs in what was described as rare and sharp bipartisan rebuke. So you've got pattern emerging. Pattern where Trump declares some emergency or tries using executive authority, and enough Republicans join Democrats to embarrass him publicly. This isn't one senator occasionally stepping out of line. This is multiple Republicans repeatedly saying, "You've gone too far. We're voting against you." And that tells you something massive about where Trump's presidency actually is. He's not the unstoppable force controlling every Republican. He's actually pretty weak when it comes to war powers and trade policy. And Republicans are willing to defy him when they think his actions will hurt them politically or drag country into disasters. And if you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe. Your subscription actually matters here. That's why we built John Brown Show, to bring you real stories and real context. All right, let's get into what actually happened. On January 8th, 2026, just days ago, the Senate voted to advance a bipartisan war powers resolution. The resolution would bar Trump from using U.S. military forces within or against Venezuela without getting congressional approval first. The vote was 52-47, which means 5 Republicans crossed party lines, voted with all the Democrats, made this thing advance. Now, this isn't the final vote that actually restricts Trump's powers. There's more steps. House would have to pass it. Trump would probably veto. Congress would need veto override, which they probably can't get. But the significance isn't about whether this becomes law. The significance is that 5 Senate Republicans publicly voted against Trump on major commander-in-chief issue, on national security, on war powers. And Trump's response shows he understands this is huge embarrassment and sign his control over party is slipping. According to reports, Trump blasted those GOP senators afterward, said they should be ashamed, said they should never be elected to office again, claimed the vote greatly hampers American self-defense and national security by stripping his commander-in-chief authority, and reportedly, Trump has been calling Republican senators directly, screaming at them about disloyalty, about betrayal, trying to intimidate them into changing positions before any final votes happen. That's not normal. That's not President calmly explaining policy. That's Trump melting down because his own party voted against him publicly. Think about what that means. Trump demands absolute loyalty from Republicans, expects them to rubber stamp everything he wants, treats any vote against him as personal betrayal. But 5 senators did it anyway, knowing Trump would attack them, knowing they'd face his rage. They voted against him because they decided the risk of letting Trump drag country into unauthorized war was worse than risk of Trump's anger. Now let me walk you through why this Venezuela war powers issue even came up and why Republicans broke with Trump. Trump has been escalating rhetoric toward Venezuela throughout his second term, talking about country as threat to American interests, suggesting military action might be necessary against Maduro regime, making not-so-subtle threats about using American power to reshape governments in hemisphere. And a lot of Republicans uncomfortable with this, partly because they remember how Iraq War went, how American military interventions in Latin America historically backfired, and partly because their voters don't want another endless war draining resources and American lives. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show, because when Trump started making moves that looked like setting up for military action in Venezuela without consulting Congress, without getting authorization, some Republicans decided they needed to draw a line, needed to reassert Congress's constitutional authority over war. And the fact they were willing to do this publicly in recorded vote where Trump and his base would see exactly who voted against him tells you these senators calculated that political risk of crossing Trump is worth it compared to risk of unauthorized war becoming total disaster. And here's where it gets worse for Trump. The 5 Republicans who voted with Democrats reportedly include senators who've been critical of Trump's foreign policy before, who represent states where voters are skeptical of military interventions. These aren't the usual suspects. These are senators who generally try staying in Trump's good graces. But they decided this issue was important enough to risk his wrath. And according to reports, these senators have been hearing from constituents who don't want war with Venezuela, who think Trump is being reckless, who worry Trump might use military action as distraction from domestic problems. Share this with everyone, because the senators are responding to actual political pressure from voters, not just making principled stand in vacuum. They've calculated that voting to restrict Trump's Venezuela war powers is actually good politics in their states, even if it angers Trump and hardcore supporters. And that calculation is crucial because it suggests Trump's hold on Republican voters might not be as absolute as he thinks, that there are issues where Republican voters will support senators defying Trump if they think Trump is leading country in dangerous direction. Think about what that means. Trump's entire power base depends on maintaining illusion of total control, unanimous support, every Republican falling in line. But when senators can vote against him and defend those votes to Republican primary voters, that illusion cracks, and Trump knows it. That's why he reacts so furiously, not because 5 senators actually stop his policies in most cases, but because defections are signs his grip is loosening, that more might follow if he doesn't crush dissent immediately. Now let's talk about Trump's constitutional argument, because it reveals everything about how he views power. Trump argues that as commander-in-chief, he has unlimited authority to use military force however and wherever he wants. That Congress trying to restrict his war powers is unconstitutional and dangerous. Ties his hands when he needs responding quickly to threats. But that's not what Constitution actually says or how war powers are supposed to work. Constitution gives Congress power to declare war, power to fund military operations, power to regulate armed forces. President is commander-in-chief, which means he directs military operations once war has been authorized. But he's not supposed to unilaterally start wars without congressional approval, except in genuine emergencies where there's no time because country is under immediate attack. Venezuela is not attacking United States. There's no emergency requiring immediate military response. So Trump arguing Congress can't restrict his ability to invade Venezuela is basically Trump arguing for a version of presidential power that goes way beyond what Constitution allows. The Republican senators who voted for War Powers resolution understand this. They're not trying to weaken America's defense. They're trying to make sure decisions about war and peace go through constitutional process, with Congress having say, not just through presidential whim where Trump can start wars because he's angry or thinks it'll help him politically. And here's what Trump's furious response reveals. He doesn't think Congress has any legitimate role checking his authority, doesn't think Republican senators should ever vote against him, even when they believe he's wrong, thinks loyalty to him personally should override constitutional obligations and responsibility to constituents. When Trump says these senators should be ashamed and never elected again, what he's really saying is, Republicans who won't rubber stamp everything he wants are traitors deserving punishment. That's authoritarian mindset. Leader's will is absolute. Any dissent is betrayal. And the fact that 5 Republican senators voted against him anyway, knowing they'd face this attack, suggests at least some Republicans are tired of that dynamic, are willing to reassert independence even if it means dealing with Trump's tantrums. This could be beginning of broader pattern where more Republicans decide costs of constantly enabling Trump's worst impulses outweigh costs of occasionally defying him, especially on issues where they think he's leading party and country in dangerous directions. Think about what that means. If more Republicans start calculating they can survive politically by voting against Trump on specific issues, his entire control structure weakens. Every defection makes next defection easier. Every senator who votes against Trump and doesn't get destroyed politically proves to other senators they can do same. That's cascade Trump fears. That's why he screams and threatens. He needs every Republican terrified of crossing him, because if that fear breaks, his power evaporates. Now let me walk you through the Brazil tariff vote, because it happened in October 2025 and shows this isn't just Venezuela, this is pattern. Republican-controlled Senate voted to revoke Trump's emergency-based tariff powers on Brazil, specifically rolling back 50% tariffs Trump imposed using emergency authority. And just like Venezuela vote, 5 Republicans broke ranks, joined Democrats to pass resolution. House didn't pass it. Trump would have vetoed anyway, so tariffs stayed for a while. But symbolic importance of Senate voting to revoke Trump's tariff powers is huge. Was described as rare and sharp bipartisan rebuke of his trade strategy, and it showed Republican senators willing to cross Trump on economic policy when they thought his tariff wars were hurting American farmers and manufacturers and consumers in their states. These aren't abstract disagreements. These are votes where senators looked at actual economic damage Trump's policies causing their constituents and decided they couldn't go along anymore, even if it meant defying precedent. And here's where the tariff situation reveals Trump's broader pattern. Trump uses emergency declarations and national security justifications to impose tariffs without going through normal trade processes, without getting congressional approval. Trump loves tariffs, thinks they're great policy, thinks they make him look tough. But problem is, Trump's approach has been chaotic and damaging. Slapping massive tariffs on trading partners based on vague national security claims, then using tariffs as leverage in negotiations, then sometimes lifting them based on political considerations, creating massive uncertainty for American businesses who don't know what trade policy will be month to month. Share this with everyone because it's hurt American farmers who lost export markets because other countries retaliated. Raised prices for American consumers who pay costs through higher prices on imported goods. So Republican senators from farm states and manufacturing states hearing from constituents getting hammered by Trump's tariff wars. And some decided they needed voting to revoke his emergency tariff powers. Send message this approach isn't working and needs changing. Think about what that means. These votes on both Venezuela war powers and Brazil tariffs reveal fundamental tension in Republican Party between loyalty to Trump personally versus representing constituents' actual interests and exercising constitutional responsibilities. Trump demands absolute loyalty, punishes any deviation, treats any vote against him as betrayal. But Republican senators have to face voters in their states, have to answer to farmers and manufacturers and business owners being hurt by Trump's policies, have to think about own political survival and legacies beyond just being Trump enablers. Now let's talk about the wider pattern, because according to reports, there's actually been multiple instances throughout 2025 and into 2026 where Republicans rejected Trump on congressional votes. It's not just Venezuela and Brazil. There have been multiple times where enough Republicans joined Democrats to advance legislation Trump opposes, to block things Trump wants, to constrain his executive authority in various ways. Some votes on domestic policy, some on spending, some on regulatory matters. And while Trump still wins most votes because Republicans control House, the fact he keeps losing occasional votes shows his grip isn't nearly as total as it appeared after 2024 election. There are limits to how far Republicans will follow Trump, issues where senators will prioritize other considerations over Trump loyalty, situations where political calculation shifts and suddenly makes more sense to defy Trump than enable him. And Trump clearly hates this, wants total control, wants every Republican voting with him 100% of time, views any defection as intolerable betrayal, but he's not getting that level of control. And his inability to keep every Republican in line is creating opportunities for accountability and restraint that wouldn't exist if entire party blindly following him. We should be clear about limitations of these Senate votes. Even when Senate votes to restrict Trump's war powers or revoke tariff authorities, those resolutions still have to pass House. House is controlled by Republicans who are generally more pro-Trump, less willing to cross him than Senate Republicans, and even if both chambers somehow pass these resolutions, Trump would veto. And getting two-thirds majority in both chambers to override veto is nearly impossible with current composition. Think about what that means. In practical terms, these Senate votes are mostly symbolic. They embarrass Trump, send message he doesn't have unanimous support, create political pressure, demonstrate opposition exists even within own party, but they don't actually tie his hands legally or force him changing policies in most cases. Trump can keep pursuing Venezuela military ambitions, can keep imposing tariffs through emergency declarations, can keep pushing boundaries of executive authority, and these Senate votes alone won't stop him. But here's what these votes do accomplish. They create political environment where Trump's actions are contested, where cracks in Republican unity are visible, and that political environment matters for future fights and future accountability efforts, even if immediate legal impact is limited. The votes establish precedents, demonstrate that defying Trump doesn't automatically end Republican senators' career, which might embolden more senators to stand up to him on future issues if they think environment supports it. Now let's talk about what this means for Trump's control over Republican Party and potential accountability mechanisms going forward. Big picture is Trump's presidency revealing itself to be weaker and more constrained than initially appeared after 2024 victory. Republicans aren't automatically rubber stamping everything Trump wants. They're willing voting against him on issues that matter to constituents or raise serious constitutional concerns. And that matters enormously because it means there's potential space for real oversight and accountability if political conditions shift even slightly. Right now, Democrats don't control either chamber, so ability to investigate Trump or hold him accountable is limited. They can make noise, can propose legislation going nowhere, but can't compel testimony or enforce subpoenas or pass bills over Trump's objections. But if Democrats win even one chamber in 2026, suddenly you've got real oversight power. Committees can investigate Trump's conduct. Subpoenas have teeth. Republicans already uncomfortable with some Trump actions might join bipartisan investigations if they think it's politically safe. Think about what that means. The Venezuela and Brazil votes show at least 5 Republican senators will vote against Trump when they think he's overreaching. That's not enough to remove Trump in impeachment trial. You'd need 67 senators for conviction. Would require like 20 Republicans joining Democrats. We're nowhere near that. But 5 Republican defectors is enough to pass resolutions of disapproval. Enough to hold investigative hearings with bipartisan support. Enough to create political pressure forcing Trump to respond and defend actions. And here's where things could escalate. If Trump's conduct becomes more extreme, if policies cause more obvious damage, you could see that group of defecting Republicans grow from 5 to 7 to 10. And at some point, if enough Republicans willing voting against Trump on specific issues, you start having real checks on his power. Even without Democrats controlling Congress, that's potential significance of these votes. They're establishing precedents, demonstrating defying Trump doesn't automatically end careers, which might embolden more senators on future issues if they think environment supports it. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown's show because now let's talk politics heading into 2026 midterms. Trump's weakness with own party is something Democrats absolutely need hammering every single day between now and November. Narrative Trump wants is that he's unstoppable force dominating Republican Party, getting whatever he wants because everyone too scared to cross him. But these Senate votes show narrative is false. Trump is actually pretty weak when Republicans think defying him is in political interest, can't keep own party in line on major issues, losing votes and getting embarrassed by own Senate even though Republicans have majority. Share this with everyone because Democrats should run ads in every competitive district showing Republicans voting against Trump, highlighting Trump's furious meltdown responses, pointing out even his own party thinks he's going too far on war powers and tariffs. Message should be, Trump is chaotic and reckless. Even Republicans don't trust him with unlimited power. So voters shouldn't give him more power by electing more Republicans who might enable him. That's persuasive message for moderate voters and independents uncomfortable with Trump, but who don't necessarily vote Democratic. If you can show them even Republican senators think Trump needs to be constrained, that makes case for divided government and Democratic congressional control much stronger. Think about what that means. Trump's rage at these defectors shows he knows his power is more fragile than he wants anyone believing. When Trump screams senators who vote against him should never be elected again, when he calls them traitors and demands absolute loyalty, that's not coming from strength. That's coming from fear and insecurity, from someone who understands entire power base depends on maintaining illusion of total control and unanimous support. Every time Republican votes against him, every time there's visible defection within party, that illusion cracks. And Trump knows once enough cracks appear, once enough Republicans decide they don't have to fear him, his whole ability to dominate party could collapse pretty quickly. Bottom line is this. Senate voted 52-47 to advance bipartisan war powers resolution, barring Trump from using military force in Venezuela without congressional approval, with 5 Republicans breaking ranks to vote with Democrats against Trump on major national security issue, and Trump is absolutely furious, posting rage on Truth Social, calling them traitors who should never be elected again. And this isn't first time, because back in October 2025, 5 Republicans also voted with Democrats to revoke Trump's emergency tariff powers on Brazil in rare bipartisan rebuke, showing pattern where Republicans willing to defy Trump when they think he's overreaching on war powers and trade policy, and Trump's meltdown response reveals he knows his control over party is weaker than he pretends. And these votes prove Republicans will vote against Trump when they think it serves their constituents or protects constitutional principles, creating potential for more defections and more accountability if political conditions continue shifting against him. This story continues. Stay tuned.